Hey there, it's Mike Langford. Welcome to the Augmented Advisor Podcast, brought to you by Blue Leaf. This week on the show, John Prendergast and I are joined by Gregg, Senior Vice President and Director of Practice Management and Advisor Research at Northern Trust FlexShares ETFs. We're going to be doing a deep dive on the rising importance of women for the wealth management industry. Now, what do I mean about the rising importance of women? I mean, obviously, women have always been important to the industry. However, it's only recently that we're beginning to see women as the primary or even sole constituency for client relationships. We're also seeing an increased demand by firms for female advisors. Why? Well, the stat that caught my eye and spurred me to reach out to Laura was the recent report that 60% of today's college students are women. 60%. If that's not a leading indicator of a major economic shift on the horizon, I don't know what is. This is going to be a very exciting conversation. I know you're going to love it. Before we get started, please take a moment to subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, the YouTubes, or wherever you like to get your podcast jam on. And if you have a question or suggestion for a guest or a topic for the show, please send that in, podcast@blueleaf.com, or swing by the website, or you can hit us up on the socials. Blue Leaf, John, myself, we're all active on LinkedIn, Twitter, and basically everywhere else you can find human beings and companies online. We're super easy to find. Okay, let's get to our conversation with Gregg. Gregg, John Prendergast, welcome to this morning's recording of the Augmented Advisor Podcast. Great to see you both.
Thanks for having me, Mike and John.
Super exciting topic.
I actually, you know what's funny? We were talking about family stuff before we clicked the record button. But, as you might imagine, I tell my family about the shows I have coming up or the shows I just recorded or whatever. And this one I'm particularly pumped about. Number one, because it's a topic that's been of just great interest to me. And I have a daughter, as both of you also have a daughter. And so we're going to be talking a lot about the rise of women. I don't know what we're exactly going to land on as a title for this, but the rise of women in wealth holding positions and their economic superpower, if you will, that's coming our way fast and furiously. And it's really worthy of a conversation. One of the big data points that and by the way, for those who are new to Laura is with Northern Trust FlexShares ETFs, and her team put together this amazing survey and analysis of some areas related to DE&I, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And one of the data points that leapt off the screen as I was reading it on my computer was that 73% of wealth management firms currently are reporting that they are increasing their efforts to attract more female clients. And that should tell you basically, and I guess most of our listeners being at wealth management firms are probably like, yeah, we've got efforts to do this. So I guess maybe before we dive into like all the stuff of why we're here and why women are such a top priority, I thought maybe we'd explore why your team is investing so much time and effort in areas related to DE&I so we can kind of set the landscape for everyone.
Yeah. So, Mike, I apologize. I'm going to correct you just a little bit. That 73% figure represents firms who have taken action toward building an inclusive and diverse environment in those firms, which I think is telling. But that's kind of part of the reason that we're investing in this, right? Because we think it is critically important for social reasons, for business reasons. The disparity in our industry in terms of what advisors look like is huge. 80% or more, a little bit more than that, are male, primarily white. Women make up 51% of the population and represent less than 20% of financial advisors. Yet as all this is happening, demographics in the U.S. are changing. We just got the 2020 census figures out, and the Latinx community is growing. The Asian community is growing. By 2045, the U.S. is no longer expected to be a white majority country. And at the same time, the wealth transfers are taking place. In 2019, McKinsey and Company did a study on women, and they said that women at that point in 2019 controlled 10 trillion with a T in wealth. But what's really interesting is by 2030, less than 9 years away, that number is expected to balloon to 30 trillion in wealth controlled directly by women.
Wow. I mean, it's a seismic shift in the control of wealth. And if you think about that 30 trillion, that's like the size of the US GDP. I mean, it's mind-boggling. And so I guess it makes sense that advisors are reading these same reports and prepping. But, as I thought about my own experience and Mike's and a lot of advisors, Laura, a lot of professionals we run into look just like us, like your demographic reports show. And in 2021, your research shows a whole different world happening. And the part that leapt out for me is this idea that 47% of non-advised consumers talk about gender as an important factor in hiring an advisor, compared to 24% just a couple of years ago. And
18 months ago.
18 months, even crazier, right? Yeah. And that attributes up to 72% across all consumers. So I'm looking at this and thinking about the demographics of existing advisors and thinking, okay, I'm a guy, I'm likely white. Whoa, what do I do about this? How do I respond? I'm a caring guy. I've raised a daughter, and I have a very diverse friend group, but me, myself, and I, not so diverse. So how do I respond to this?
So there's so many things. So first, you're a white male, but you want to help all of your clients. So that's the first thing. You want to show all of your clients that you care about them, that you're interested in them. If you're a solo practitioner, I would say just take the time to get to know all of your clients. If you've had a couple that have been clients for some time, and the woman in the couple is not really engaged, what can you do to engage her? It's probably not by leading with the returns and the alpha and all of that. It's talking to her, getting to know her. What keeps her up at night? What are her personal and family goals? Once you get to know these women, you may find that they're not disinterested. Maybe they're intimidated, in which case it's incumbent on you to provide financial education to them. Or maybe they're just too busy and they're thinking about, all that they have on their plate and what they have to do next. And in that case, you need to find ways to be more efficient with their time. But there's a lot you can do. And one thing, if you're not a solo provider, if you are building a team, bring in some female advisors. You mentioned it. What we learned in our survey, both in 2019 and then in 2021, is that all people feel comfortable working with people like them. And so women quite often feel more comfortable working with a female advisor. They are 5 times more likely than men to work with a female advisor, and that was up from 4 times in 2019. Also, where there are other commonalities in terms of shared culture, age, those sorts of things. But, we talk a lot in our firm about broadening the bench. Having a team that is diverse, both in age and gender and race and just, sexual orientation. When you have more people at the table, you're more likely to find that somebody else on the team may find an affinity with one of your clients more so than you.
I think one of the things that came up for me as you talked about that is this different approach to serving different populations, and in terms of gender differences, you're implying something I think that's really important. This need to demonstrate understanding of the client as kind of the first and foremost thing, where a lot of advisors have a current strategy more revolves around demonstrating knowledge, right? Knowledge of the financial information. So don't spend time mansplaining alpha. Spend time listening and understanding the client needs, wants, and desires, and reflect that. And that, I think that's a really important shift that a lot of advisors could put into practice right away.
Yeah, we did another separate survey on primary breadwinners in late 2019, and these were high net worth, high powered executives and professionals, and then we kind of looked at the gender nuances, and what we found is that one, unlike the stat we're so used to hearing that 60% of women will leave their advisors after death or divorce, these women, who were probably very proactive in hiring their advisor, were much more loyal than their male counterparts. But what they wanted and what they enjoyed most about their advisor is that they felt that they had a relationship. They were looking for holistic advice. Yes, of course, they wanted good, beating the benchmark returns, obviously. But they were, again, very busy executives. They didn't want to have to go to their advisor and say, Crystal's 9, what should I be doing with college? Or mom fell and broke her hip, what should I be doing about elder care? They expected that their advisor would be concerned enough about them through this relationship that they would bring those things up and, take that extra thought process off the table for them.
That's really, one of the phrases that's been used around DE&I concepts and more like pop culture, if you will, more the broader society, has been be an ally for folks, right? So if you aren't part of the demographic group that is feeling like they're either underrepresented or underheard, if you will, or in some cases being unfairly treated, be an ally, right? And I think that thought process might work here as well, right? So, again, I'm a middle-aged white man, right? I am not a woman. I'm never going to be. And so one thing I can do, however, is come at it with actually a genuine desire to be helpful, right? To listen, to understand that other, and you've kind of hit on some of these. Be helpful, be interested in the other person and their experiences. What are the things that concern them? What are the things that interest them? What are the things that they're fearful? What are some of the experiences they have that, John and I have never had, right? So like as an example, like when, I was talking to John about this before, the world's kind of built for people like John and me, right? Like we've never had to experience a scenario in which we walk into an office of any type of professional and they talk to us as if we're less than, if you, at least I haven't, right? They usually they address because, the whole culture of their business is built up serving the white guys, right? And so we're used to that. I mean, heck, I was even joking, like my height, I'm about 5'10". I'm the average height of an American man, right? And most cars, airplane seats, everything was built to suit me. You know what I mean? So I've had that type of experience. So I think it starts with understanding, right?
Yeah, and I think, I remember one time I was I think it was during the interview process, and the advisor, he was great, and he was trying to share some stories that would appeal to us and make us want to give him our business. And every story he told, he said, when I was talking to my client and his wife, and I thought, well, isn't his wife your client? It's just, and I don't think he necessarily It wasn't intentional. It wasn't because he was a bad guy. It's just there's a lot of unconscious things that we all do. And I think, in this whole world that we're in now, where there is more focus on DE&I, words really matter. For those, who have forms that say, Mr. and Mrs., husband and wife. What about your clients who are same-sex couples? Just across the board, we really have to kind of consider some of the little nuances that we don't even think about that come out of our mouths.
I love that point, that words matter. And I'm thinking about some in the audience who are a little more old-fashioned, who think, oh, come on, don't be so sensitive. And I think the point that you're getting at is so critical for advisors to understand in context, because advisors modify the way they speak, the language that they use all the time already. Selling situations, there's a technique called mirroring that most advisors are taught about how to make clients feel comfortable. This is just an extension of what they're already doing. So for those of you who get a little wiggity when you hear things like words matter, they've always mattered, man. They've always mattered, right? This is just a new aspect of how to apply what matters and make it make sense for a growing client segment, a really fast growing client segment. Laura, you brought up this McKinsey study, and it's really eye-popping, especially looked at next to yours. And one of the things that I was amazed by is the diversity in results in a couple of areas. The one thing that jumped out for me were things like how women and men invest differently, and how your team seemed to have come up with some differences. So McKinsey said women are less risk tolerant. What do you say to that?
So I would say we as an industry have to stop using women and men, because women, it's not a monolith. Men are not a monolith. We are very different. So our study, as I mentioned, our primary breadwinner study focused on just that. The primary breadwinner in the home who had assets, beyond $1 million outside of qualified plans and personal residence, and they are different than all women. And in fact, what we found is that they were actually half as likely as men to identify as being a conservative investor. When we asked the men and our women to tell us about, are you conservative? Are you moderate? Are you aggressive? 30% of the men said they were conservative investors. Again, high net worth, primary breadwinner men. 14% of women identified as being conservative. On the other end of the spectrum, when we asked about, are you an aggressive investor, men, not surprisingly, more often said that they were. However, that was 11% of men versus 7% of women. So a much more narrow difference there. And in the middle, they all kind of, came together. And I think that we do ourselves such a disservice by talking about women and that we're all alike. I do believe that, a lot of the concern for risk is true for many women. It wasn't true for the women in our study.
What's interesting about when that type of thing too is, look, sometimes when somebody reports what their risk tolerance is, I always talk, maybe it's just an aside. You don't know what somebody's risk tolerance is until they experience it. So that's another piece too, right? So be mindful as you work with your client, right? What they say might not actually be what is, but that's so important that people are, your bias or your assumption based on your life experience or what you just kind of been brought up with a kind of stereotype that women are less,
Mike,
less aggressive.
I would add to that, women are more likely to stay the course than their male counterparts. And in terms of like making assumptions, there was a study done in 2019 by King's College, which is in the UK, and what they found is that male advisors were more likely to create conservative portfolios for their women clients and more aggressive portfolios for their male clients. So over the course of many years, we all know the impact that can have. And it wasn't really based on, a deep risk assessment. It was just, well, I know that women are a little bit more conservative, so I'm going to do this. So you really have to watch it.
That's another gem bubbling up from what you've just said, Laura. It sounds like a key, and this sounds like it's with women or any other client that isn't like you, or for that matter, clients you think are like you but probably aren't. Follow the data, not your opinion, right? If you get someone to say they are a moderate investor, give them a moderate portfolio. If they behave like a moderate investor, give them a moderate portfolio. Really pay attention to the data and check your opinions at the door.
And I would say, a lot of those risk questionnaires are pretty black and white. What if the market went down 20%? What would you do? Well, how about shifting some of those questions to, what if you lost your job? How would you feel about it? What if you, won the lottery? What if you needed a home repair that you didn't expect? I mean, bring it into real life circumstances as you're talking to your clients, in addition to the risk, questionnaire.
Yeah. I'm going to create a segue to like the core topic or the big, holy crap, I want to have Laura on the show because I saw this news story pop up. You can find it. We'll link it into the show notes here, but there was a news story that came out recently. I saw it in the Wall Street Journal. I think the data point was reported a lot of other places that 60% of college students in the year 2021, 20/21, were women. 60%. That's, first of all, it's great for all the guys who are going to college right now. It's amazing. I'm sure my son is stoked to hear this. He's going to college soon. Like, what? 60% of the population is going to be women? All right for me. However, there are some very, very big implications for the wealth management industry in that number, right? This is just really huge news. We're likely to see some massive shifts that'll affect your business. Whether you're a middle-aged white guy advisor or other, you're going to see some changes, right? Women are likely to have much more fruitful careers. If we see 60% of college graduates are going to be women for any chunk of time, we can expect to see much more larger population of professionals being women, the ones who are making money. They're likely to stay single longer, right? Usually a lot of data underneath says that the higher your education level is, the longer you stay single, the longer you hold off on having children because of your career and so forth. So there's going to be some of that stuff in there. And then I actually think that we're likely to see, more women business owners and the like. So there's an old saying that, skate where the puck is headed or go where the ball is headed type of thing when you think about sports. And in business, I think that's true too, right? We are, if I gave you a time machine, you could go back and you knew that the tech industry was going to be what it is today, you made a lot of money. As an advisor, you could serve those clients and so forth, or you could invest it. Here we know, like with a high degree of certainty, what is going to happen demographically. The McKinsey study's telling us this type of stuff. What are your thoughts on the educational shift and how it's going to shape the future of financial advice?
So I have a lot of thoughts around there, and they're not all positive, unfortunately. Oh, okay. I've got a daughter headed into college, so we're looking at schools, and we're seeing, the 60-40 split, and I've got two others that are in college. So that's been in place for the last few years that I've noticed, just personally. But that data from the National Student Clearinghouse, I believe, is where that came from. This shift has been going on for 40 years, Mike. It's not, which is great, for women. But over the last 40 years, we haven't seen a lot of movement professionally. And I want to go back to, McKinsey again. They have a great graphic in that study that I think you're going to link to. And it shows that as, in 2020, as men and women enter the workforce, it's almost equal. Men are, I think, a percentage point or two more than women. But at each rung, at each management rung, fewer women are promoted. At the VP level, it becomes 70% men, 30% women, and there's a lot of factors going on there. And we've seen some movement in the C-suite, but it's still, I think, 78-22 men versus women. And so what's happening is women are not getting promoted in those early stages. They're not getting the opportunity to get that really important P&L experience, that revenue experience, which impedes them from joining more senior roles. Now, I do think a lot of what you said is absolutely on the mark, that I do think that we will see women stay single longer, and that will have an impact, that we will see more movement, but there's still something going on. I know a lot of people would say that it's because women leave the workforce to raise children, and I think that's one part of it. And oftentimes, they may leave just as their career is about to take off. Maybe they've been in there 5-6 years, they're 27, 28 years old, and they say, well, I'm just going to take a 5-year break. And I don't know about you, but for years, as I've talked to my friends who've chosen that path, they've said, well, they take whatever their base salary is. So if they were making $60,000, they're like, well, I know I'm going to lose, $360,000, but it's worth it. I want to be home with my kids. It's very important. And then I'll go back in. But what a lot of people are not paying attention to, and hopefully the advisors are, is all the other incremental loss, all the opportunity loss. So you're 28 years old, you're a great professional, and you're going to step away right at that point where you can often see fast career growth, promotions, pay raises, bonuses. You're also not contributing to your 401k. Your employer's not contributing. If you've got a pension plan, you're not getting that. Over the course of your career, your loss is probably not at all going to be $360,000. It's going to be over $1 million. And I think that we as, advisors and professionals, and if we want to see women continue to move forward, we have to, one, help families understand what the true cost of stepping out is, and forget that it's much, much harder to go back and get in. And then two, is there a way? And I think there's so many more ways now that we're coming out of COVID, right? Flexibility may be the key to keeping your foot in the game. Part-time, flexibility and geographic location. But I just think there's a lot of things working, and I love the fact that more women are graduating, but I don't think that's going to create an immediate sea change, unfortunately.
You raise a super interesting question when you're talking about how this might look going forward and how it might be different than, our historical pattern over the last 40 years. As you've said, this is a long-term trend, and, still not that many more women in the C-suite. But the pandemic was transformative in a lot of ways, and it really proved that flexible working arrangements and remote work was not only possible, but, in white-collar occupations and professional occupations, you could thrive. You could do more in many situations. So I'm curious if you've heard of, even anecdotally, any early evidence that women are considering that as a way to stay in the workforce when they're raising children.
Well, I think that they are, and I'll tell you, I had the great fortune. So my oldest is 21 years old, and 21 years ago, I was given a hybrid work schedule that I kept as I moved through 3 companies. I don't know that I could have done, my round trip commute was 3 hours into the city. I don't know that I could have done that 5 days, but I could do it 3, and it kept me in the game. And so I do think that women are definitely looking for that. I actually was on a call yesterday with the CEO of a $4 billion RIA, and he was talking about being short on advisors, but his mandate was that you had to be in the office. And he said, everybody that wants to work for me, men and women, don't want to be in the office 5 days, but that's what I require. And so, that was, a business decision that he was making, but he's without talent right now. And so I think firms really need to be more open-minded. I mean, this flexibility has worked for 18 months. It's worked for me for 21 years. And you're not giving yourself access to the best talent pool you can if you just take that off the table.
Such a super point. I mean, and it's a great story that really illuminates the issue for me, which is we get in our own way as an industry right now. And if you don't do this and offer flexible and remote options simply because, frankly, what I believe is the right thing to do, then you ought to do it because it's enlightened self-interest, right? If you can't get talent, you can't grow. And talent votes with their feet. So I guarantee you some other talented advisors are going to other firms where they have a more flexible work approach. I think that kind of progress is hard to resist over time. So, we'll see.
And John, I would add to that, from a client standpoint, it's easy to do a Zoom call. Do I really want to get, in my case, it's a 45-minute drive. In other cases, it might be just 20 minutes. But do your clients really need to see you in the flesh 4 times a year, 2 times a year, whatever that is? Or are they relieved to be able to just hop on a Zoom? And if that's the case, then why does it matter where that advisor sits?
And most studies say they're happier on Zoom. And it's an interesting question too, because, okay, so let's say they need to see you. Wait a minute. So if you're dealing with ultra high net worth or high net worth clients and they want to see you, I mean, a lot of advisors go to the house. So if that's the case, okay, what's the point of the office?
Right.
What, because you need more oak and mahogany? It's just, again, I think bigger, clearer thinking about everything that's sort of in play here is going to be required for firms with an old-fashioned perspective to prosper.
And I would say just offer your oak and mahogany. That's not the decor that makes women feel comfortable. So there's a whole another rabbit hole we can go down, but we won't.
Yeah. Well, both of you were just hitting on it, and I think I probably did a poor job of not really hammering this home. So I'm so wonderfully grateful to the both of you for hitting on this. We're talking about opportunity here. I know for some in the audience, they might kind of be slumping a little bit like, well, how do I adjust to this? You guys are killing some of my assumptions here or the way that I'm doing business. Like, I'm never going to be able to rise to this, whatever. There might be some angst, if you will, from some folks. And it's like, this is about opportunity. You put, instead of thinking of, your shortage mindset, think of an abundance mindset here of like, there is, as Laura said, we're going to $20 trillion of value transitioning to women from a wealth perspective here. We're seeing this rise of women in the workforce and as business owners. We are starting to now dig into objectively getting some data on the differences here or what are some concerns, and they're right in front of you, right? Or what are the opportunities you can grow your team without having to expand that office. You could actually have people working from their homes, right? Connecting with clients that might have been out of reach for you for the longest time. This is about opportunity. So we do shows like this. Why I get so excited about it is because of that. I say like, whoa, there's this untapped universe, right? Of potential clients. There's this untapped universe of potential talent to come into your firm that might not have found it attractive before because you were in that mahogany office, right, John? Like, there's just so much stuff right in front of us, and you should be pumped about hearing things like this. And please don't take this as like a, hey, you middle-aged white dudes, your time is over. We're coming for you. It's not that at all. It's actually, we've got some goodness coming for you. This is some good news, dude.
No, I like to tell a story. This very senior level woman that I spoke to about a year. Well, it was right before the pandemic, and C-level person, and she had been working with the same wealth management team for years, and she wanted her children to remain with the team, but she knew often the children will leave, so she started bringing them in when they were in high school and college, and she always demanded that the full team be there. And what happened is that they're now in their late 20s. They stayed with the wealth management team. So she has 3 children and a husband. Each one of the family gravitated to a different advisor on the team. One of the kids to the youngest advisor, one of the kids to the oldest white male advisor. But the bottom line is you don't know where that affinity is going to be. So the more diverse your team is, the better chance you have of hanging on to maybe the next generation or pulling new people in, or you just never know.
And all of that would have been wildly easier on Zoom.
Yeah, exactly.
I think I've said this before in previous shows, but trust me when I tell you, if throw out your own personal preferences, right? I think one of the things that gets in the way for a lot of us is like we project on the world what we feel or what we're comfortable with or what we do. We assume the rest of the world must be exactly the same like that, right? And it could not be further from the truth. So just because you don't enjoy Zoom doesn't mean your clients don't prefer Zoom, right? So be willing to ask them. I mean, I joke about, I bring my parents up frequently because when texting and social media first came out, my father kind of grumbled. He's like, if I just want to talk to you, I'll call you on the phone. And now it's like a total pain in the butt to get the guy on the phone. In fact, he sends me too many texts or Facebook Messenger or whatever. It's like, Dad, just get off Facebook, please, for a little while.
You've had to mute your father? Wow, that's cold.
I've been tempted at times, trust me. And he knows. I actually had to talk to him not too recently. Hey, listen, Dad, you like, he's a early riser, so he gets up and he's texting first thing in the morning. And first thing in the morning for him on the East Coast is like everybody's still sleeping here, and we're getting pinged. And like, I had to say, Dad, listen, the kids aren't enjoying their first thing in the morning text, buddy. Like they like text from Grampy, just not like at their time, 5 o'clock in the morning, buzzing on the phone next to them. So why don't we just ratchet that up a little later? After school text, maybe, Dad. But kind of a comical way of saying, check your assumptions here, test them, go talk to your clients. Like you said, Laura, earlier, talk to your female clients and ask them, what's important to them, get to know them a little more deeper, but also this type of stuff, right? You brought something up, Laura, that I hadn't even thought of. It's why are advisors still dealing with 9 to 5 hours, right?
Yeah.
Why, right? Your clients they're working. They don't want to talk to you while they're working. Right? Why not have evening hours? Why not? And by the way, I always jokingly say like a lot of advisors like to golf a lot, because why not take a nice golf break during the day and talk to your clients in the evening, right? That type of stuff.
Exactly. I think we just have to, you said it best, leave your assumptions at the door. Don't assume.
So we're getting close to the end of our time here. I think there's probably some people going, okay, I'm excited about this, right? I want to bring more female clients in. I want to broaden my team, so forth. What are some core suggestions you can have? Maybe a couple that advisors can do in terms of attracting new female clients, making sure that they're on the road to doing that, or heck, attracting female advisors to their team. What are some things that you would suggest? I know maybe we've hit on some of them already, but if you had to say, hey, here's your top 3 things you should consider.
Yeah, well, I think the first thing to do is get to know your current female clients. What, who are they? What keeps them up at night? What are their, interests? And then out of your female clients that you currently have, what do you like most about them? Is there, 3 or 4 clients that you just enjoy? Like, I want more of Nancy. So what traits do they have in common? Is Nancy a widow in her 70s? Is Nancy a baby boomer that's working full-time as an executive at, a local corporation? Identify who you want to work with, and then go out and get them. And how do you go out and get them, right? Develop a persona that is everything you like about Nancy, and then talk to that persona. The first thing somebody should find on your website is who you serve and why you serve them. If it's female executives, if it's women in transition, if it's business owners, and everything beyond that should all relate. You should have blog posts talking to the concerns of of the persona you want. Your social media you talked about, should be sharing articles of interest for those women. Your personal correspondence should harken back to the things that are important to them. But I think that a big mistake that people make is trying to serve all women. You've got to segment who you enjoy working with, and then, do a great job with them. Listen and learn, attend events with them, put on events for them.
That's wonderful, wonderful advice. I love that. And you know what you might find, like as you're writing that persona, that there may be, as you mentioned earlier, it may be less gender specific than you think, right? Mm-hmm. I think about a lot of the professional women in my life, and some of them hold very high level positions at tech firms, right? And so if I was thinking, I want to work with executives at tech firms, they're not all going to be men, then, right? So being mindful that some of them are women, but the women may have some special concerns that you want to make sure that you're helping them with in your services. They may have some specialty needs that you have to address.
The thing I like about what you said, Laura, is it's a practical, actionable thing that starts at home for advisors, right? They can go talk to people they're already working with, learn from their own clients, and build on that. There's no intimidating market research. It's pretty straightforward. Talk and mostly listen to your existing clients and build on that. So I think that's incredibly practical advice, and is good advice no matter who you're thinking of going after as clients.
Yeah, and I would say, I guess, to kind of echo what Mike said earlier, John, you may love working with tech executives, and that could be the niche. And you might be surprised at how many women will fall into that category. So I don't think you necessarily have to go out seeking women, but if you are, I would just, one other word of caution, all women in transition aren't the same. There could be a 70-year-old widow and a 45-year-old widow. They have complete, of course they need comfort, of course they need guidance, but a completely different set of needs. And so, again, as much as you can narrow your niche and really provide outstanding, over-the-top service to your niche, the more you're going to see your business grow, because those people are going to be talking about you.
Wonderful. Well, Laura, this has been fantastic. I really enjoyed this conversation. And like I said, I totally geek out on this topic, and it's really one that I get amped up about, because you see this opportunity for the members of the audience, and just, for our industry at large. And it's just really, really exciting. So thank you very much for taking the time to come on the Augmented Advisor podcast. It was wonderful having you.
Well, thanks so much, John and Mike. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Appreciate it, Laura.
All right. Thanks, guys. Thank you very much for listening to and/or watching this episode of the Augmented Advisor podcast. It was fantastic to have you with us. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as we did. Huge thanks to Laura Gregg from FlexShares for sharing the insightful data that her team pulled together, and frankly, for sharing your own personal experience, right? It's one thing to see the stats and the trends. It's another thing to hear firsthand experiences of like how somebody experienced the world, right? Either as a potential client or as a professional woman in the workplace. Really, really good stuff. So I suggest you kind of ask the women in your life, what have been some of their positive and negative experiences, and what can you learn from that in addition to this conversation? Really, really powerful stuff, because remember, this is all about opportunity for advisors in the industry at large. So let's make sure we seize it together. All right, as I mentioned at the top of the show, please make sure you subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast platform, and do us a favor. Make sure you give the Blue Leaf page a follow on LinkedIn. As I mentioned at the end of every one of these episodes, we share every one of these episodes on LinkedIn, and we love to have you be a part of our community. All right, okay, that's it for today. Please make sure you're staying safe and be nice to each other. We'll see you next week on the Augmented Advisor Podcast. See ya. Bye.